The Bike Club podcast is a collaboration between Beth Curran and Akshaya Parthasarathy.
The Bike Club podcast acknowledges the traditional custodians of the land we record on. We pay our respects to elders past, present, and emerging.
Welcome to Bike Club, a tech podcast crafted by the girls for the girls. Our mission to elevate, educate, and explore the exciting world of technology.
So tune in and remember, the first rule of Bike Club is to talk about Bike Club. Hi everyone, welcome to Bike Club. I'm Beth.
And I'm Akshaya.
And we thought we'd just reintroduce ourselves because it's been a little while since we've done that. And we're on almost double digits. I think this is episode 9.
Yes, almost.
Is that correct? So close. So yeah, welcome to this episode. I'm going to be giving the report this week, and I'll get into that soon. But Akshaya, do you want to give us this week's rule first?
Yes, for sure. This week's rule is a little bit technical, probably more relatable to, our tech girls and just like the ones who code on a day in, day out basis, or who knows. But the rule is that always have a rubber duck in your vicinity. So the rubber duck debugging method, I don't know if you know about this, Beth, but it's just about having any inanimate object nearby, wherever that, you sit to code. And the reason we have that is oftentimes when we feel stuck in our thought process, just voicing it out to anybody or anything can help you really just figure out the next logical step. And this may happen when you're facing a particular error. It's very common in, just the tech world, simply because people use this as a method to debug their code. And of course, like this need not be an inanimate object. It could literally just be your colleague. But in case you feel a little hesitant to ask your colleague about helping you out with your piece of work, then just go ahead and talk to your little rubber duck, and you'll know that, you'll figure out your mistakes. You'll figure out either how silly you are. And the best part about talking to an inanimate duck on silly mistakes is that it's not going to judge you.
Yeah, no judgment from the duck.
Yeah, I'm going to show you, like, this is mine.
Oh, you have one!
I actually do have one.
Wait, it's so cute. It has a little pink crown.
Yeah,
Oh
like
my
a little
gosh.
purple crown, actually. Yeah. Oh, we should post a picture of this.
Post a picture on the stories. Yeah,
on our stories, just
that's
to say.
so cute.
So yeah, that's my little
I should get
companion.
one.
My non-judgmental little duck that I talk to.
I usually just use my husband as my rubber duck, but I should get an actual rubber duck.
That's fair.
So I don't have to talk his ear off about random problems he doesn't know anything
whatever,
about.
Yeah, whatever your animal of choice may be. A duck, a hippopotamus. Penguins are pretty big right now. Pygmy hippos are pretty big on the internet at the moment.
To talk to.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, always be in possession of a rubber duck and keep it in your vicinity while you code.
I love that. And I feel like it's for coding, but I feel like for any technical,
literally anything,
job or like any problem that you're trying to solve probably works just the same.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah.
All right. Well, I'll kick off the report.
Okay.
I'm very excited about this one. I think she's a really cool lady. Really interesting story. So this person, she was actually technically the second person, but only by a couple of hours to ever receive a PhD in computer science in America.
Oh.
Yeah, so some people say she's the first. She's definitely the first woman, but it was someone received theirs, and then a couple of hours later, she got hers as well.
Oh, okay. So PhDs. Wow. Okay.
Yeah. So yeah, because she got it when computer science was still a very new field, and so yeah, second ever person to get a PhD in computer science. And she was also a Catholic nun.
I think is
very cool.
Might know who you're talking about.
Yeah. So the person I'm talking about today is Sister Mary Kenneth Keller.
Okay.
So I'll probably just call her Mary. But yeah, so she was born in 1913 and grew up in the Chicago area. Both of her parents had only had up to like an 8th grade level of education, which I think was probably pretty normal back then. And she went to a school run by a Catholic organization called the Sisters of Charity of the Blessed Virgin Mary, which it gets abbreviated as BVM. And so she went to that school for her whole schooling, and then she decided to join the sisters. And like, I don't know. Do you know what a sister is? I don't know how
Yeah.
common knowledge this is in terms of like Catholic terminology.
Kind of, I guess. Yeah. I'm not, I
Yeah, so
mean, but yeah.
sisters is just like another word of like the group of nuns.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. So she
I've seen enough
joined.
horror movies for that, actually. Yeah. That's probably where the knowledge comes from.
That's funny. I'm
So,
thinking
yeah.
like Sound of Music.
Yeah. Oh,
Um,
yeah, that's a good cultural
yeah.
reference as well.
But so yeah, she joined the organization, and you spend like 3 years like preparing to be a nun. So you
None.
don't become
Yeah.
a nun straight away. You have to like do like your training and like your spiritual learning and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So she spent a few years doing that. And when she joined the sisters, her first name was actually Evelyn.
Mm-hmm.
But then when you become a nun, you change it and you take your like nun name. I'm sure
Okay.
there's a more technical term for it,
Yeah.
but you take in a new name that like shows that you're like now in this stage of your life, and she became
Uh-huh.
Mary. And during that time as well, she was also studying mathematics, and a minor in Latin. So she did
Mm-hmm.
maths and Latin. She got her bachelor's degree, and in 1935, she actually became like a full nun. She took her vows. She became part of the group, and she was only 22 at the time, so which is pretty normal for nuns. Like a lot of
Mm-hmm.
nuns, you become that pretty young because you start kind of your journey towards
Mm-hmm.
that when you're, a teenager.
Yeah.
And the way that it works, at least in the States, I don't know how it works in other places. I mean, I don't know that well how it works in the States, but from my reading, it seems like the way that it works is that the nun, all the sisters who are part of that church, they get sort of assigned to a job. So
Mm-hmm.
she was assigned to be a teacher.
Okay.
And so she taught like primary school through high school, and she taught, yeah, all the different subjects, mathematics, English, at the Catholic colleges that were run by the nuns.
Mm-hmm.
Um, that was her job. And part of that was that they, once they were committed to their assignment, they couldn't just go and like do other things. Like they couldn't just go and pursue other things. So they had to do their studies like in the summer terms, like in school holidays basically. And so it took her quite a few years to get her bachelor's degree because she wasn't able to actually study it full time once she became a nun. And she also then decided to get a master's degree. So she got her master's degree in mathematics.
Okay.
Um, and she finished her master's degree almost 20 years after starting her undergrad.
Oh, wow.
So so she started her undergrad before she was a nun
Right.
in like 1933,
Mm-hmm.
and then she didn't finish until 1952. So it took 19 years to get her master's degree. So if you feel like bad about how long uni's taking you, or like you're behind, like just
Yeah.
don't even worry about it, because yeah, I'll get to it, but she's a pretty revolutionary woman in computing, and it took her 20 years to get her bachelor's and her master's. So
Okay.
she was very committed. She stuck it out all of those summers studying to get it done. Yeah, she had her master's in maths. And then there was a college nearby, a Catholic college, so like a kind of like university, like a higher education.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and there was the director of that college. She, by the time it got to the 60s, so she got her PhD, oh sorry, her master's in 1952.
Okay.
And then about 10 years later, this nearby college, who was also part of the same church organization,
Right. Yeah.
they were like, oh, computers are kind of starting to become a bit of a thing.
Yeah.
Maybe we should sort of be aware of this and have some people who can teach computing, so that our students can be up to date with what's going on in the world.
Okay.
And so they wanted to kind of get a bit of a computer science program happening. And yeah, this is early 60s. And so they sent Mary they knew that she was very good at maths and that she was a good learner and she was very committed to her studies. And so they sent her to like sort of a workshop
Mm-hmm.
for computing at a local university. And the quote she said from that experience was, "I just went out to look at a computer one day and I never came back. It looked to me as if the computer would be the most revolutionary tool for doing maths that I could get." So she kind of had this encounter with computers and she was like, this is incredible. This
Yeah.
is going to be such a good tool. Like, and she's so
Yeah.
passionate about mathematics. She's like, this is amazing. I
Yeah.
need to like know more about this. So then this college, they were like, cool, that means you're like interested. You want to kind of pursue this. We'll send you off
Yeah.
to do a PhD. So she got to go and do a PhD. Now, when I say send her off,
Yeah.
they released her from her assignment for 1 year. So she had 1 year full time to
Just
do her
to
PhD.
do oh my God.
Yeah. And then she would only have summers after that.
Right, okay.
So she still managed to do her PhD in 3 years, which
Wow,
is, like,
that's
so
lesser
impressive.
than what yeah, that's lesser than what she's
Yeah,
doing now.
yeah, because like, most full-time PhD programs are, like, 4 or 5 years now, and
Yeah,
it's like,
exactly.
she had
Yeah.
1 year full-time and then basically 2 summers, and she
Oh,
did it.
cool.
It's pretty amazing.
Mhm.
Her thesis was titled "Inductive Inference of Computer-Generated Patterns."
Okay.
Um, and the thesis statement was, "The basic problem of this thesis is the exploration of an approach to the mechanization of inductive inference." So I'll get a little bit more into that later. But yeah, so that was her PhD. So she did a PhD in 3 years, and then she moved from the primary school, high school that she was teaching at. She moved to that college who had originally sent her out to learn this stuff. So they kind of sent her out to get qualified, and then she came back to the college, um, and became sort of a one-woman computer science department for many,
Okay.
many years.
Okay.
And then sort of continued to extend and found the educational programs both at that school but also at like lots of other Catholic colleges and lots of other schools around America. She became very fundamental in terms of teaching computing. She wrote like a bunch of textbooks and workbooks and tutorials and all that kind of thing of to kind of get computing to young people and to anyone who wanted to learn really,
Oh, that's very
because she
cool.
was just so passionate about it.
Yeah.
Yeah, so one of her quotes that she said about learning computer science, she said that the essential qualities to study computing were confidence, humility, and patience. And I would say that's pretty accurate, I
Yeah,
think.
that stands even
um,
today for sure.
Absolutely. And I love this quote because this is, I'll talk about it afterwards, but this quote, she says, "The computer does not make mistakes, and it's hard on one's ego to have to assume the blame every time something goes wrong.
Oh.
That is where the humility comes in, and then you get to practice by correcting your mistakes." And I
Oh.
was like, "Oh, it's so true."
That is very true.
Like,
It
when
is
your
quite
code's
easy.
broken,
Yeah.
yeah,
You just straight up look at it and you go, "Yeah, something must be wrong there." Huh.
yeah, because it's
Yeah.
like the computer can't be wrong, like, I must have done something wrong, and so you have to have the humility to, like, yeah, it's hard on one's
Yeah.
ego to assume all the blame.
She
It's
probably
like it
had her
is,
own
sometimes you're
little
like,
rubber duck to, kind of walk her through that
yeah,
process at that time.
yeah. Yeah,
That's
I
so
just love
cool.
that perspective on it, and it's like it's one of those things that I feel like when you interact with, like, older people sometimes with technology,
Yeah.
and they're like, "Why is it not working?" And it's like, it only does what you tell it to do.
Yeah.
So, like, if you're telling it to do the wrong thing, it'll do the wrong thing.
Yeah,
I've had that conversation
it's
with
a
so
very
many people.
wise outlook into computer programming at such like an early stage when,
Yeah.
programming, I don't know, what was it? It could have been like Cobalt and Basic at that time, I guess, like as
Yes.
programming languages.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
she was, like, a colleague of the inventors of BASIC.
Oh,
Um,
wow.
so, yeah, she
Yeah,
kind of
that's
studied with them,
yeah.
like, alongside them a little bit. So, yeah, it was
Yeah.
around that era.
Oh,
Um,
damn. That's very cool.
yeah, 60s, 70s. So she continued to teach and develop teaching resources for, the rest of her life.
Mhm.
Um, and this included all the way up to her teaching other nuns who were retired in their like nursing home.
Okay.
She taught all the other nuns how to use computers, which
Oh.
I thought was just like so cute. And there was a photo that I found of her like in the nursing home, like sitting and like showing with a bunch of other nuns sitting around her, and they're all like learning the
How to
computer.
use. Oh, that is so cute. Yeah.
I was like, that's so precious. I love it so much. Um, so yes, she was a lifelong learner and lifelong passion for helping
Mhm.
others learn,
Mhm.
which I think is really wonderful. So she passed away in 1985, but yeah, she was really fundamental to a lot of the way that computer science is taught now, both in America but across the world.
Okay.
Um, and her original thesis and the work that she did is pretty fundamental to sort of the philosophy of computer science now, and I'll get into that a little bit in the technical explanation. But yeah, it's pretty foundational to the way that we look at particularly things like AI and how computers learn.
Oh, wow.
Um,
How
and so she
revolutionary.
was yeah, so she was passionate about teaching humans, but she was also passionate about teaching computers to learn. um,
Oh,
from the very very earliest days of sort of computer science research. So
okay.
yeah, I'll get into what that looked like.
Right.
in a
That's
minute.
a pretty cool story. So she was definitely the first. Oh, I am reading a couple of articles and I think I understand what you mean because everybody says that she was the first person in the US to receive a PhD in computer science. But yeah, I guess there's
Mm.
like mixed one of like first and
Oh
second.
yeah, it's like
Yeah.
joint first, I guess. Two
Right.
people on the same day, so like joint first
Okay. Yeah, but
people to
definitely
get a
the first
PhD.
woman. Look at the it's a very like very cool photo with her standing next to the Beatran computer.
Yes, that's such a good photo. And that's probably the one that I'll use for the Instagram post because yeah, it's so iconic. She's in her full like nun outfit and
I know,
like
yeah, and just standing beside that.
the
That is very
best.
cool. Yeah.
Yeah, such a cool lady. But yeah, that's all I have in terms of her biography.
Good stuff.
Okay, so now I'll get a little bit into what her research was about and what her PhD thesis was about. And it does kind of connect with her passion in life, which was learning,
Mm-hmm.
as I sort of mentioned earlier. And yeah, she really wanted to use computers as a way to enhance the learning process for people, which is very cool. And she was the kind of person who, very early on, she was very, I guess, adamant about the fact that computers have a place in education.
Okay.
Because obviously, even now, there's lots of people who are like, oh, these kids are just relying on the computers and they're not using their own brains. But she was very like, no, like the more that we can teach a computer to do, the more we can accelerate education
Mm-hmm.
for people. One of the things that she said was automation, or more precisely, cybernation, is a fact of our lives. Its impact is swift and in many ways silent. Our sense of responsibility should make us wish to be informed and to inform our students. Therefore, the computer can give a new dimension to the education we offer.
Oh, how interesting. Feels like she
Yeah.
like I get what you mean by being very, I suppose, foreseeing AI to some
Yeah.
extent. Yeah, and that was what, like in the 1960s?
Yeah.
Wow. That's
Yeah.
crazy.
Yeah. Her thesis was published 65. Yeah.
Wow. Yeah.
So to get into her actual thesis, I said before, it's inductive inference on computer generated patterns.
Mm-hmm.
And this sounds a little bit complex, but this was the early days of computing. And you've got to remember that this is like basically the building blocks of teaching a computer to do what humans do. And so
Okay.
inductive inference is something that everyone does. So
Okay.
inductive inference is just when you look at a pattern and you infer or you predict future behavior based on that pattern,
Yeah.
right? So you might go outside and every day when there's super dark clouds overhead and it's breezy, it starts to rain later in the day. And so if you do
Mm-hmm.
that enough times, you start to think, okay, well now I know when I see dark clouds, it's going to rain. Normal, like basic human process. It's just the
Yeah.
process of learning by seeing and
Yeah.
learning by example. She basically wanted to see, can we get a computer to do the same process? Because prior to this, the only computer programming that was done was giving a set sort of if X then Y, if X then
Right.
Y, like you know what I mean? Like sort
Conditionals.
of set patterns where
Yeah.
it's more of a someone gave you a notepad that had what the weather was going to be each day, and then
Yeah.
you either took an umbrella or didn't take an umbrella because you already had a list of what the weather was going to be.
Yeah.
It was that as opposed to you going outside and inferring from what you can see what the weather's going to be.
Right. So it's very
Um,
hard coded versus like
yeah,
judgmental. Yeah.
basically, just like different types of logic.
Yeah.
Um,
Okay.
and the type that Sister Kenneth wanted to really explore was, yeah, this idea that you could give a computer prior information and it could then give you an output and
Mm-hmm.
understand a pattern and predict future values
Okay.
based off of that. And that is the basis of AI, right? Like that's
Yeah.
we feed
Machine
it,
learning.
we
I was
give
gonna
it
say
input,
that.
understands a pattern instead of us saying when I type this, do this. You
Yeah.
give it data and it understands that, and then it performs based on what you've given it.
Oh, that is so
And
cool.
so,
That's
yeah,
basically
one of
like
the
every fundamental, like supervised learning in machine
yes,
learning.
exactly. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's like so fundamental to all of that.
Yeah.
But she was the first person to kind of suggest that a computer could even do that kind of thing.
Oh,
Like
so
it just
cool.
wasn't thought about. So her thesis, her PhD itself, what she did was she used a built a program in Fortran
Mm-hmm.
um, to generate the next mathematical expression in a series. So she
Oh,
basically would feed in like a mathematical pattern. So like a
okay.
say a function where it's like, 4x plus y, blah, blah, blah. She would feed in the output. So she would say, when I input this, I get this. Then when I input this, I get this. Then when I input this, I get this. And
Mm-hmm.
she would then say, okay, so now if I input this, what do you think it's going to be? She wouldn't tell it the process that's happening. She wouldn't tell it what the function was. She would
Okay.
just tell it the input and the result. And then the computer would infer from what it's looking at
Right.
what it should do next, as opposed to
Okay.
being told, here's what you need to do. And she used it using derivatives. So I'm not sure, like derivatives is a mathematical
Yep.
concept where you,
Yeah.
yeah, take the derivative of a function. It's a certain pattern that you have to follow. And so she would give the computer a function and its derivative, and then the next derivative of that function, and then the next derivative, and she would say, okay, now find the next derivative of the function.
Okay.
Um, and she managed to build it. The conclusion of her thesis was that she was able to mechanize inductive inference, so get a computer to perform this calculation in less than 30 seconds per problem, which now is like, well, duh. But at the time,
It
that's
could have
like
been like pretty big deal.
wild.
Yeah,
Like,
I know.
yeah, like this is stuff that, people would be getting out. They'd be getting out their Taylor series, they'd be doing it by hand, they'd be doing
Yeah.
geometric calculations. Like so it's a pretty big deal in terms
Yeah.
of what she did. And she wanted to demonstrate that algorithms could perform tasks, complex tasks like differentiation, which, can take a human years to learn,
Mm-hmm.
through learning by example rather than a rule-based process.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the main difference. Even though she showed this, it actually wasn't a very popular approach for many years after she developed it. So it kind of was like, oh, that's cool. Anyway, like it was not really seen as like very
The
applicable.
revolutionary
Um,
concept that it could have
yeah,
been.
it was,
Oh.
it was, yeah, it was kind of like, okay, but like that doesn't really help us.
Oh my
Um,
God.
it was sort of sidelined for a long time. And then all of a sudden, this idea of deep learning and
Yeah.
artificial intelligence has come back. And it's like, this is what she was talking about all those years ago. It's kind of, now we have the technology. And a part of it was that she didn't have the computing power or the technology to build systems complex enough that people went, oh, actually, we should use this. Because it
Mm-hmm.
takes a lot of computing power, obviously, to ingest
For
large
sure.
amounts of data and
Yeah.
analyze those patterns. And so she was doing this for a very simple mathematical pattern. And so she
Yeah.
was able to ingest and process that data manually. But then to do it at any kind of scale was
Yeah.
just like impossible. So
Yeah.
she didn't have the technology to really prove what this could do, but she had the theory and she had the idea. So yeah, very cool.
Hmm.
That was her thesis. I also want to talk a little bit about her sort of philosophy of computing
Yeah, I was
and
very intrigued by that.
yeah, because I said this earlier, and part of her thesis, she said, thinking about a computer as a pattern-based machine as opposed to a rule-based machine. That's
Yeah.
obviously a big philosophical shift in how you view something, but also that a computer could be an idea processor, that it could be outside of just numbers. It could
Okay.
process words and symbols and other things, and it could understand patterns from those. She really wanted this to be applicable more broadly than just being an advanced calculator,
Mm-hmm.
which again was like super ahead of her time in terms
For
of what she was
sure.
thinking about
Yeah.
and what she was thinking was possible. Yeah, very interesting. Even at the time, people thought she was a visionary.
Mm-hmm.
Um, there's record of her saying that wristwatches would one day be computers.
Oh my
um,
God, that is, yeah. I feel like we
yeah,
did we did do another person, if I'm not wrong. I think Patty was also kind of like a very visionary on that terms.
yes, yeah,
To
was
just
like this is
predict.
gonna go crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah. And she said that, computers would transform not only the mathematical sciences, but also arts and humanities,
Mm-hmm.
um, which again, we're seeing now in
Yeah.
full force,
With AI,
um,
yep.
in the way that AI is
Yeah.
changing the way that we do everything from computing to making art. And then she talked about, this philosophy of learning. So she said, we don't really know how people learn. With computers, we can mechanically simulate the cognitive process.
Okay.
So she wanted to kind of build the processes that a brain takes and that a person takes into a computer.
Mm.
Again, so she was one of the first people to ever talk about artificial intelligence.
Mhm.
And she thought that if we could build uh, the process of learning into a computer, the computer could then assist us in the process of learning. And so
Mm.
it's this kind of back and forth process, which I think is really interesting. Another thing that kind of relates to today is she sort of predicted the anxiety around AI taking everyone's jobs,
Okay.
because that's a
You're
big
making
like
her
hot button
sound
topic
like
at the moment.
yeah, you're making her sound like a person sitting behind a crystal ball and like kind of like the
I
oracle
know.
right now.
I
Yeah.
think she was just like really wise, and she just like saw this stuff, and she was like, I see where this is going. Like
Yeah.
she was, it's amazing. So I wonder if that had to do with her sort of spiritual life, in that she like,
Yeah, seeing
she
the light.
was very focused on sort of just meditation and like
For
thinking
sure.
about,
Yeah, she just
I don't
yeah,
know if
it
that
just came
helps.
to her or something.
Yep, yep, that's
Who
all she
knows?
did.
No, but that is very
Um,
interesting because I mean, it is a very common pattern that we notice with almost all of the women that we covered were
mm,
aware of the futuristic impact of the technology that they were working
yeah,
on at that point. And these were, whether it's historical figures or even just like the recent figures that we did, they've all been just yeah, they've all just been had they all seem to have that foresight into where technology is leading,
yeah,
which makes me so intrigued about the young women who are doing so well in like universities or just
yeah.
performing out there in the industry today about what do they see coming out in the next couple of years because where could it be headed? So yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's interesting in the sense that, I don't know, often people say like women are more people oriented and men are more technology oriented. And I think
Yeah.
there's like some truth to that, whether it's because of the way we're socialized or brought up, or whether it's biological, who knows.
Mhm.
But I think it is a pattern that we've seen with the women that we've looked at in terms of their ability to see how computers actually impact humans. Like they're actually
Mhm.
interested in how
Yes. Yep.
computing impacts society, and what is this
Yeah,
going to
I
mean for
agree.
us as people in 10, 20 years, where I think often when you hear like male founders, or people who are in technology, they're just obsessed with the tech. Like they want to make this technology work as best as possible, and they want to make
Yeah.
it the most efficient and the fastest, and they're thinking about those kind of things.
Yeah.
And they're less likely potentially to look at what does this mean in 5, 10, 15 years, because they're
Mm.
not people oriented necessarily in that way, whereas most women in tech, even though they're very technologically, like they're not mutually exclusive. You can't, it just
Mhm.
because you're technologically advanced doesn't mean you can't be people minded. Maybe
People-minded,
that
yeah.
comes more naturally to women in terms of thinking about, yeah, what does this
Everybody
actually
else,
mean?
yeah, for
Yeah,
sure.
everyone else thinking about other people, basically.
Yeah.
Empathy.
Yeah.
Yeah, it
That's
comes
yeah, that
more
could be
naturally.
that's pretty yeah, that is a very interesting point.
Yes. And yeah, and like, as a spiritual person, she's also very connected to people, and she's very,
Yes.
thinking about people, and
And the
like,
greater good. Yeah.
yeah, and like philosophically thinking about the world as a whole, and the sure that's all in there.
Yeah,
Um,
for sure. Yeah.
so yeah, I thought that was really interesting. But yeah, anyway, her response to this potential anxiety around, computers are going to take everyone's job,
Mhm.
um, she saw it as a road to more meaningful work.
Okay.
Um, and so, in the sense of, like, in the context of education, she said she envisioned that computer would improve education and would free teachers up to actually focus more on human contact with
Mm.
the students and the teachers, because they're less busy doing paperwork, and they're less busy running, a math lesson. They can actually
Mm.
focus more on the people in the room, which is an
Mhm.
interesting perspective. Um, and
Yeah.
then
I don't know.
sort of more
Yeah.
generally,
I don't
yeah,
know how
she
true
said,
that might have been for like I think today's scenariio because I think the
yeah, it's
teachers are
interesting
more
to think
concerned.
about.
Yeah, because the teachers are now more concerned with I suppose plagiarism and kids
Yeah,
using technology for their own benefit, which probably doubles up on the work that they have to do.
yeah, no, it is interesting, and I wonder if it's like, are we on our way to that world where computing
It,
makes
it
it
is it's a
actually
very
better, and we're
idealistic
kind of
approach. Yeah.
in the gray area, or are we sort of like on a different path that is just, you know,
Yeah,
turning into a nightmare?
for sure.
Yeah, but yeah, she said, it can aid the world's growing population in production, protection, and decision.
Hmm.
she said, "It is reasonable to stand with those who hope, in the sense of those who hope for a positive future with tech,
Okay.
but it must come with a sense of responsibility, since man has not always used his inventions well."
Yep.
And yeah,
Yeah, you
I
can't
just think
argue.
that's so wise and so poignant to
Yeah, you can't
every
argue with
era.
her on that.
But yeah, the era we're living in now, where we just see AI, which she basically pioneered,
Mhm.
doing amazing things and doing things that wouldn't have been possible without it, but also doing things that are really concerning
Mhm.
and like really unethical.
Mhm.
And so, yeah, it's very interesting, her perspective on that. And she was a huge advocate for computer literacy.
Okay.
As I said before, she produced lots of textbooks. She taught old people in her in her retirement home how to use computers. Like that was kind of her bread and butter in terms of what she was passionate about. So I thought we would probably connect with her in that way, in that
Definitely,
we're
yeah.
also passionate about, this is what we're doing on this podcast is,
Yeah,
wanting to
just
talk
the
to people about
education.
computing
Yeah.
and yeah.
Yeah. I think I get why, because I was reading this book recently, and one of the bigger learnings that it said, one of the bigger learnings that I got from it was the fact that um well, you do learn by learning itself or just by reading, but then
Mm,
the true knowledge of how much you've learned comes from how well you can impart that knowledge onto others,
mm,
or rather like how
yep.
well you can teach it. So it explains why she was such a wise woman, because she was just
Mm.
basically, she was working with a very tough crowd to begin with. I mean,
Yeah.
these were what, like, senior citizens of the 60s.
Yeah. Well, the whole
Um,
range, like all the way from primary school all
Primary
the way
school.
up to,
Yeah, I
yeah,
know. Yeah, yeah,
seniors,
yeah.
like
Yeah, but I mean, teaching my grandmother how to use a smartphone now is tough job, so I can't even imagine how it could
yeah,
have been like
when
back in the
computers were
days.
brand new, trying to
Exactly,
teach
yeah.
it to people, yeah,
Yeah.
in the early
So,
80s when she was retired.
yeah. Would have been lovely to attend one of her classes just to see how she takes.
Yeah, I feel like
Yeah.
she would have been such a cool lady to sit and have a chat with.
Chat
And
with, yeah, for sure.
yeah. There's another great photo in the article. There's so many good photos. I might have to put a few on Instagram. But
Mhm.
there's a good photo of her in the article that I've been looking at, where it's basically her sitting in a lecture hall and it's just all these men in suits, and then you just see this one like nun
None.
outfit.
What a
It's
power
so
move.
great. It's like what an icon.
Oh.
So yeah. But yeah, that's my report on Sister Mary Kenneth Keller.
That was a
Um,
very good report. That was a very unusual, one of the more unusual women that we've definitely
yeah,
seen, for
I've
sure.
been wanting to do it for ages just because I thought it was so fascinating that, to be not only a woman but also a nun, like a
Yeah.
Catholic nun,
Yeah.
and to be one of the first people to ever get a PhD in computer science is just such a cool random thing to have
Yeah.
happened. And
It would be pretty
yeah.
good to read up about, I don't know, maybe like the societal ramifications of her just being so
Yeah.
successful, just given given the level of accolades that she has while being in the
Yeah.
line of profession that she is.
Yeah. I
So
mean, I
yeah.
think it's interesting because a lot of like, ironically, being part of a sisterhood or a I don't know what the right word is, not church, the group of nuns,
Yes.
you know, being part of an organization like that,
Yeah.
in some ways has actually allowed for a lot of great art, science, etc., because it's a system where women, they do everything. So there's women who teach, there's women who fix things, there's women who, it's all like run by them,
Mhm.
and they take it upon themselves to upskill. So it was another sister who was running that college who said, oh, you should go and get your PhD in computer
Oh,
science. Like
cool.
it was, the person who ran the college was also a nun,
Yeah.
and she was the one who kind of gave her the push. And so as much as it seems kind of unlikely, as I was reading the story, I was like, well, actually, this kind of supportive and like, I guess, almost independent community of people being like, we're just gonna figure everything out ourselves, and we're gonna run
Yeah.
schools, and we're gonna, like, has kind of helped her be able to do that, because it was
Right.
like they weren't just gonna bring men in to teach it. Like they were like, no, we need to get one of our nuns to learn computer science
Yeah.
so she could teach. Like, I don't know. It's
Yeah.
kind
A
of
very
like,
need of the hour kind of addressing. Yeah.
yeah,
That's
and in a
true.
sense, her context almost allowed her to do that, because someone needed to step up, and she did it.
And she
So
did.
I don't know. It's
That's
very
pretty cool.
interesting.
That is very
Yeah.
cool. Thanks, Beth. That was a very cool report.
Yeah, no worries. I had a lot of
Awesome.
fun reading about her.
Yeah.
I wish there was more. There's not that much around. I could only find a couple of articles about her actually, like a
Mm-hmm.
relatively short Wikipedia page. So
Okay.
it'd be cool to
Well, all the more
someone put
reason
together.
to get the word out there because clearly this is
Yeah,
an
yeah.
underrated woman, not spoken about enough. That's about it that you have for us this week.
Yes, that's all I have on my report this
Awesome.
week.
That was very cool. I suppose we have quite a bit of excitement around the next episode because that's going to be a guest episode that we're going to do.
Yes, very
Yes.
exciting.
And this is a very good friend of mine, so I'm very excited for the chat that we're going to have. And apart from that, if you've been following our Instagram, we've kind of started doing a feature book of the month kind of a
Mm,
series. And it's basically highlighting either a fictional woman, also who is also in STEM, I guess. And her name is Elizabeth Zott, and the book is Lessons in Chemistry. So we thought we're going to do maybe a book per month, just highlighting either fictional women in STEM that we really, really like, or just non fictional books that may be relevant to women in STEM all around the world.
mhm.
So if you've read that book, let us know. If you have, maybe by DM. You can follow us at Bite Club Podcast on Instagram, or you can even just email us your thoughts at the same. And yeah, that's all that we have for you today.
Amazing. Thanks, Kashaya. And thank you for putting together the book club because I'm a reader in theory, but I haven't finished a
In
book in a
theory.
long time. So
Yeah,
I'm
it's a
like, yeah,
good
I read.
personality trait.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's like not so much at the moment. But I'm
yeah, it's
keen.
a
I'm
pretty
keen. I
good
want
one.
to use this to get inspiration for myself to go and read some of the books that you're recommending and be able to recommend some myself. So it's good motivation.
For sure. I think I've got some pretty good ones lined up with some really badass women in STEM. And I want to keep that theme maintained while also exploring different genres. So, yeah, it could be a pretty interesting take. So,
Yeah. I mean, I have a bunch of nonfiction books just like sitting on my bookshelf that I need to read. So
I
maybe
get
I'll try
that.
and read those and actually,
Yeah, that makes
and then I
two
can
of us.
report on them.
Awesome.
Yeah.
All right. Well, see you in 2 weeks, everyone.
Yep. Thanks for listening.
Thank
Bye.
you. Bye bye.